What's going on, everybody? Eric Taylor, Taylor to Astrology, starting a new series. It's been a minute. It's been time that I've been talking about it, and now I want to do it. Looking at some celebrity charts, but I'm starting off first with my fellow Virgo brother, Michael Joseph Jackson. All right? Born in 1958, the Virgo, August 29th. So I'm going to break it down on the chart. I've seen a lot of astrologers do it, and mad love to them. But yeah, maybe a little bit different from my perspective. I'm not looking at Placidus, I'm looking at the whole sign system. And I got a lot of history of Mike Jacks, starting even in 1975, seeing him on Broadway in New York City performing in the play The Wiz. And my sister and my family seeing the Jacksons and, in concert all the time. So, being a fellow Virgo and all that stuff, I got a lot of details and perspective. But I'm going to let the astrology speak the truth and embrace and face all the good, bad, and indifferent and controversies. All right? So sit back, relax, get some popcorn, and enjoy Michael Jackson's natal birth chart reading. Yeah, I'm going to get into it. Eric Taylor, Taylor to you Astrology. I'm excited. Been waiting on this one. Oh yeah. Let's do it. All right, Billie Jean, not mine, heal the world. Remember the time. Yeah. Love Mike Jacks. All right. Man in the mirror. All I want to say is they don't really care about us. Oh, and I didn't even tell you this. They canceled the video, but I was almost in the video with Michael Jackson and Notorious Big. I got casted for it, and then they didn't film it. And they did a song together. See, I told you. Yeah, some history. I got you covered. Let's check it out. Peace. All right, so we're continuing, as I gave you that little introduction. This is Michael Joseph Jackson, August 29th, 7:33 p.m., 1958, Gary, Indiana. Doing my celebrity birth chart series. I don't know how many of these I'm going to do, but of course I had to start with the King of Pop, a fellow Virgo, since I am Eric Taylor, Taylor to Astrology of Virgo. You start off with the ascendant, right? Pisces. With the moon, Michael Jackson. So that makes Jupiter his chart ruler, which is over there in the 8th house. That Jupiter, which you see, what's fascinating about Michael and this Jupiter is that he's also got the North Node here in the 8th house, okay? And one thing about Mike, with this being his chart ruler, it shows, that he was really fortunate in making money through his relationships, other people's money. So it lights up the 8th house because that's the chart ruler, right? You got to make sure, let me make sure this is muted here. So that's important. We'll get back to that. Sorry, this is my opera edit. It's like it's been Mercury retrograded. I can't zoom it down, so you only get to see the chart in pieces. But this is where I can do it at, so I'm just going to do the best job I can and just ask for God to give me the wisdom and intuitive knowledge to read this chart for Michael Jackson, who I'm a huge fan of. But I'm going to be truthful and honest, okay? So you have the Pisces moon on the ascendant. I've seen often in charts where people they can lose their mother at an early age. Obviously, that's not the case with Michael. But the Pisces moon is super psychic, intuitive. This literally is Michael Jackson being a shapeshifter, right? Morphing in Thriller, right? Coming from the man to the werewolf, like just the way he could move and dance and sing and co-produce his tracks. And Michael do the boom, boom, do the beatbox and all that stuff. I remember when Oprah interviewed him, he was like his own sound machine in his house. It was like sick. It was straight up hip hop. I was like, yo. And truth be told, a great story, just to bounce around. I was casted to be in the video with Michael Jackson and Notorious Big, but then they canceled the shoot for that video on that album they did together. On Michael Jackson's album, but he had a song with Biggie on it. And I auditioned for it, but they didn't do it, so I didn't get to meet Mike and Biggie. But that would have been pretty amazing. So this also speaks to the spiritual connection that he has with his mother. All right. So a couple of things, just starting from this point, that I found really fascinating is we'll go around the zodiac wheel. And what's really cool is that his north node is his south node is at 23 degrees, making a conjunction to the true black moon Lilith, which really speaks to Michael being very spiritual, super instinctual, trusting his gut and his intuition. He put on that facade with the voice, which kind of was like the Pisces moon. But when you have the Aries in the second house for your speech, your family values, right? The Jacksons were assertive and aggressive, how they initiated and came on the scene in 1969. Michael being 11 years old, which in annual perfections would have been the 11th house of Aquarius, which was kind of weird and strange for him to be the lead singer of the Jackson 5 when he had, 3 older brothers, and Tito, Jermaine, and Jackie. And then you got Michael, Randy and Marlon, right? So he's one of 9 siblings, But this Lilith here, conjunct the South Node, one, this also indicates and shows the separation for Michael from his family. And even, from some of their values. They were Jehovah's Witnesses, which we'll get into a lot when we get into his sexuality and different things like that. His first album, I just want to kind of talk about that. Off the Wall came out in 1979. So in Annual Perfections, that was in his Sagittarius 10th house with the midheaven conjunct Saturn. So this indicates right here, not only was he extremely disciplined to have success in his career and to do his first album, this shows the 10th house. And because the midheaven is here, career, legacy, reputation, workplace, work environment, fame, not necessarily fame like you're famous. You see that more in the 7th house, but fame like, oh, that's the Jackson kid. That's Michael Jackson, Joseph Jackson's son, right? The Saturn is the strict disciplinarian from the father, Joe Jackson, for his career, right? That was part of the law, the beliefs, the philosophies of hard work. And that also propelled Michael to be a powerful businessman and to launch his first album, Off the Wall, at age 21. Well, the second album, Thriller, is right here at age 24. And Annual Perfections, that's back at the ascendant, 0, 12, 24, 36, 48, okay? So what's amazing about that is that, you guys, Thriller was him doing the shape-shifting and morphing from Michael Jackson, and they're in the graveyard and this and that, Pisces associated with the 12th house, death, the moon, right? Like your inner self, your body, your health. Like he changed, and you could think of it as like the roots and ancestors, and changed and morphed and went from, Michael to the werewolf in Thriller. So that I thought that was kind of deep when I was just, putting together this reading and looking at all that there is with Mike. I mean, he was a musical genius, a savant. I'll probably do Prince's chart maybe next if if you guys like it and I, want to get into, that. I mean, the only people that I've really thought of is Michael Jackson, Prince, and maybe Muhammad Ali. But when you see this shows the Thriller album, which he did with Quincy Jones And what was so huge about this, it was the Pisces is very creative and the imagination is off the charts just for the Pisces ascendant. But understand the Pisces ascendant is very naive, very pure, in some ways very childlike. They wear the rose-colored glasses and they see the Virgo 7th house, other half, with the Pluto conjunct the Sun, Juno, part of fortune, and all that stuff there, vertex as well. You know, it's one of those situations where he was born around a full moon, a little bit before it, you know, or I would say, I guess, 6 degrees and 11, a little after the full moon, but basically still under the eyes of the full moon. So that means that his life, there was like a big light on his life, you know, that Michael was here to do something huge. And the Pisces moon, there's so many musical people and artists, but Michael, Prince, Kanye West, Kim Kardashian all have the Pisces moon. When you have the moon on the ascendant, though, people love you, right? And Pisces is associated with like foreign lands and the seas. Michael was loved all over the world. And you could see that here with this, you know, moon conjunct the ascendant. So, you know, Aries is here for everybody in Aries. Won't go to Taurus till 2044. But it's about, you know, spiritual awakening, creating discord, you know, to get to like a higher truth. And I think for Michael, initiating and being assertive with his speech, you know, even, you know, you could talk about the Lilith because it's the divine feminine, but it's also finding your tribe, getting rejected. You know, Michael was often teased by his brothers and felt bullied sometimes, or even by the father. And that Lilith would show the father kind of rejecting Michael and his different ways. It was that Lilith. That Lilith made him stand out in his own family. You know, and in Aries, it's very assertive. So even with the food, you know, issues with, you know, Michael was pretty much almost like bulimic. He had a lot of issues with food. Okay. So when you get to this third house of Mars and Taurus, wow. I mean, this describes Michael to a T. And I'm a Western tropical astrologer using the whole sign system. I know a lot of astrologers have broke it down in Placidus. It's just the wrong way to go. Whole sign system is the way to go. It's more ancient, more accurate, whether it's in Hellenistic, Alexandria, Babylon, all the ancient texts from the Hindsight Project, they use the whole sign system. Okay. And Mars and Taurus is, yeah, it's a little frustrated there, right? Mars went into Taurus the day of the insurrection. But what's fascinating, when it's in the third house, right, and it's in Taurus, number one, Taurus in the third house, we don't know this, but maybe some of his friends or family could contest to this, that maybe Michael liked to drive fast. But he could be, you know, very playful, assertive, and aggressive, even towards sometimes his younger siblings. I watched a documentary on Janet, and Mike was kind of like sometimes, you know, a little abrasive towards Janet. You know, they had their falling outs and then, you know, came back together when they did Scream. But they did a lot of things separately there, which I thought was fascinating. But Mars is the soldier, the warrior. It's active, competitive, athletic. It initiates, right? And in Taurus, it's initiating the movement, the physical body. This is the house of skills, self-efforts. Even elementary school. Well, we know Mike at 11 years old, leaving elementary school, getting ready to go to the fourth house, he was basically initiating the physical movement with the dancing and training and working on his voice, Taurus, the throat, to sing, right? And that lights up, Taurus lights up the Venus. Okay, forgot to say that this Aries, you know, the chart ruler of the second house, Mars is here in the third. So it would show that his assertive and initiating would be with his skills and self-efforts. Mike was very independent, broke away from the family, and started to do his own thing. Okay, Mars and Taurus, once it gets going, you can't stop it. Right? And so Mike was a supreme dancer, a great singer. I actually wish he did more ballads because Mike's ballads were like just beautiful. Okay. When you look at this fourth house, you know, Hey, Gemini, that speaks for a lot. A lot of conversation, a lot of movement in the home. They could not really go out and play. They would barely be able to play in their local community. And then when they sensed what time it was that their dad was coming home from work, they had to run inside the house and get back to playing and training with the music, or else Joe Jackson was coming home and whooping butt. Okay? Now, when you're talking about the Cancer fifth house, well, the fifth house is children, and he had the three kids, Paris, Prince, and Blanket. And he named his kids after Prince. Michael was enamored and in love and just in awe of Prince because Prince played all the music. Michael was darker and getting the pimples and the blemishes. Even though he was, a handsome young man, he didn't see himself that way. And then when he was doing Thriller and then Prince was coming out with Controversy and then Purple Rain, after 82 and then 84, it made Mike feel insecure. And one thing I would say is that him naming his children after Prince, I don't know, it's just real deep to me. But he was definitely nurturing, caring, and secure about his kids. But I don't think those three kids are his biological kids, right? He had them with Debbie and, with the doctor, and maybe it was the doctor's sperm, who knows? One thing I do think is interesting, though, with this fifth house, Sirius is the dog star Sirius, where many people feel that Jesus and other deities are from. And then the Vesta, you can see like a little twin flame energy. It makes me wonder, because it's kind of in a trine to the ascendant and the moon, was Michael and his mother, their bond was so tight, was there like a little twin flame past life energy? Because the fifth house, you could see past life karmas. Okay. I just want to jump around, but I'll try to just work in order because there's so much that I want to even talk about with the first marriage. And, Michael got married at 35. So that would be back here. Okay. This isn't what created the Chiron wound. I'll get to that in 19 degrees, 19 years old soon. But it was a sudden, weird marriage to Lisa Marie. They were 10 years apart. It was right before his 36th birthday. So 36 would be here. 35 is the 12th house, right? And it didn't last long. They had the kiss at the MTV Music Awards. That was awkward and weird. Just a lot of different stuff. But Michael was known to go out on some dates with Madonna and, different things. I think the big thing that people don't understand with the Jehovah's Witness, for Michael, he felt uncomfortable because on the road on tour, he saw his older brother sleeping with women and his father, Joe Jackson, sleeping with women. But they were taught that having sex before marriage was a sin. And seeing his father cheat on the mother and his brothers having sex, it distorted his view. And also, I think, leads to this Chiron wound as well, in terms of the 12th house being bed pleasures for Michael, just feeling weird about sex in that way. And then that plays in effect here. And this is where things get kind of interesting, right? The sixth house of work, daily routine, health, hygiene, service, small pets, conflicts, divorce, your coworkers, your bosses, your mother's siblings. So having the Uranus conjunct Venus, right? And then obviously having the Mercury here and Pallas Athena, and this is all in Leo. What's kind of deep, the Venus, Uranus, this is the house of sickness and illness. So Michael had like a couple random things. The Pepsi commercial, burning his scalp, and it was so bad and painful. He had a fall somewhere in Europe off a stage or something. And he had a lot of physical pain, which made him take all this medicine, where he was searching out doctor after doctor to get medicine to help him with his pain, almost like Prince, ironically so, right? But it was weird injuries, weird illnesses. And also don't forget, because I do believe he not only hurt his head, but he hurt his back. And Leo, right, also associated with fire for the Pepsi commercial, right? And Venus, it's like literally getting burns to the body. Now, the Uranus, Venus, though, that speaks to, his skin issues, which then led him to then bleach or dye his skin in ways that was really innovative, weird, bizarre, unique. Okay. And we'll get to this Venus Chiron, right? Because, I know a lot of astrologers will see the Venus Chiron potentially as indicators of sexual abuse towards children, especially being in the conjunction with Uranus. Not necessarily so, okay? In the sense that the Venus opposing Chiron can also speak to his childhood wounds. And we don't know if the father or the older brothers, was there any physical or sexual abuse? We know that there was physical. They've all spoken on that, even Michael, and they hinted to it. We don't know about any sexual abuse, okay? But I think also there was this Peter Pan quality that you could see here. Now remember, the sixth house is also the house of being an adult, right? You got to set the alarm clock, got to go to work. So Mike, he was always on tour, traveling, flying, Uranus, Venus, making money, traveling the world. And he would use his Venus and Uranus in Leo for the elaborate costumes, the dance moves, the looks, the fashion, the videos. He was meticulous. Okay. I saw a video the other day. Michael said for each album, he wrote 120 songs for an album that might have anywhere from 12 to 14, 15 songs. They didn't do he had one double album, but for the most part, the songs were like between 12, 15 songs on an album, maybe 10 to 15. So imagine him writing. So this shows the tireless worker that he was with the Mercury. Mercury in Leo speaks to the creativity. Mike was uber, like super duper 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 creative, more than most. He pimped out that Leo and Mercury like you've never seen anybody do before in the house of work and service and daily routine. Now, what's funny though, right? Never Neverland. Yeah, we all know that was weird as hell, Mike. I love you, but that was weird, my fellow Virgo brother. But what? The Uranus Venus, he loved animals. The sixth house, he had like his own zoo there. And then having the children, right? Remember, Mercury represents the youth. Now, I'm going to tell you, Aaron Carter, Corey Feldman, Macaulay Culkin, all said Michael never touched him. And Michael, he said he regretted paying off the first victim. He just felt like he was under so much pressure and, didn't want to deal with it and just wanted to pay them off to get out of the whole media. Because the media wasn't fair to Mike. We all know that there was bias. Some of it was racism. Some of it was a bunch of different things. But the reality is he was an easy target because he was so weird and unique and different. And some of that is, you guys, the South Node, Aries. So, you could probably guess in a past life, Mike might have been on the Pisces Aries cusp, right? The moon could show the past life potential sun sign. But then this South Node in Aries, conjunct the Lilith, I bet you Mike was probably in a past life born on like March, maybe on the equinox, maybe March 21st, 22nd in a past life. He was on that Pisces Aries cusp, right? Like Peyton Manning, Kyrie Irving, JJ Watt, different people like that, Gary Oldman, just a sidebar thing. But understand that this is Uranus, how you are seeking freedom for your soul, liberation, breaking social norms. Mike broke every social norm you could fathom, right? The original boy band, the leaving, having the cartoon, right? All the stuff that they did, the Jacksons, performing on TV, all the shows, probably I think it was Ed Sullivan, Johnny Carter, they were on everything. The Jackson 5 was huge. Now, one thing that I want to mention at 17 years old, right? So 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, Michael Jackson was in the play, the Broadway show, 1975, The Wiz. Diana Ross. I saw Mike at 5 years old live on Broadway at the Wiz with my sister, mother, and father. It was amazing. He killed it. It was like rave reviews. The Wiz was super big. You haven't seen it, Google it, watch it, YouTube it, whatever. But that speaks to, even though Venus doesn't do well in this malefic house, but this also speaks to, because Venus in Leo is super generous, right? And Mike would spend so much money. As much as he made, he spent money like crazy, right? Shutting down the mall to go shopping, buying a whole amusement park, Neverland, all this stuff. But this would be the annual perfection year where he was in his daily routine performing on Broadway doing The Wiz. Very Leo, very creative, theater, acting, right? Sixth house, being the adult at age 17. Well, just 2 years later, at age 19, jumping around a little, here's the Chiron wound, you guys. Aquarius, 12th house, 19 years old. What happened? 1977, Michael moved to New York City. A lot of people don't know that. And did a film with Nipsey Russell and a couple different actors for the film of the play, The Wiz. And it was trashed. It wasn't received well, didn't do well in the theaters, theatrical release. So that created this Chiron wound. The 12th house can also be associated with isolation. Maybe he felt isolated in New York, but film. And I don't know, you could guess, maybe Mike lost his virginity at 19. That could be a part of it too, because the 9th house is bed pleasures, the hidden enemies, hidden talents, the Aquarius. You know, who knows, right? I think one thing we can say, Mike might have been, a hidden talent could have been, he was definitely a visionary, futuristic. He might have been decent with technology. We just don't know. I mean, he died before the big Twitter boom, right? Mike was Twitter before. Mike was social media going viral before all this stuff happened. When he dropped Thriller or any song or video, the whole world was watching MTV. If you're too young to remember or understand, whether it's MTV or BET, when Michael Jackson premiered a new video, it was like a Mike Tyson fight. Nobody was in the streets. Everybody was watching television. Everybody was watching the exact same thing, and they would talk about it the next day in school. That's who Michael Jackson was. The king of pop and the king of entertainment, okay? Bigger than Prince, bigger than Elvis Presley, bigger than, Chuck Berry. Michael was the man, okay? So that very well could be a situation that showed this Chiron wound, right? But, I really believe that Corey Feldman, Aaron Carter, rest in peace, and Macaulay Culkin were telling the truth. A lot of people were trying to get money grabs. He was filthy rich, successful black man who had too much power. Well, Michael called out Tommy Mottola and called him the devil, and then left Sony Records owning basically half of Sony Records. People were pissed. People in the music industry, the power brokers, I'm not going to say names, everybody knows who they are and all that stuff. They were envious and jealous and were after Michael ever since he left Sony and didn't like his power and success. He had the Beatles catalog and his own. Michael owned the publishing, which was taken from him and the family, I believe, after he died. I know there were 2 lawyers that got a big stake of claim on that stuff. It's sad and disgusting, But I think one thing you can see here too, and remember he died at 50. So Mike dying at 50 years old, right? I told you would look at the 48 here. So 50 would be back in the 3rd house, Mars and Taurus, right? Mars is blood, separation, cuts, divides, surgery, attacking, weapons, right? So, yeah, that Dr. Conrad was found guilty, but we don't know. Mike could have been killed by him or somebody else. And yes, I'm sure Mike played a part in it by wanting this medicine to sleep so he could, get good rest to feel healthy for his final tour. This is it. And he died 1 month after my son was born, right? So he died June 25th, 2009, before his 51st birthday. But died in his local community at home. Taurus, the physical body, right? Hooked up with needles, blood, medicine. Taurus, the five senses. It's, it's really deep. This chart lines up like crazy. So, I'll say this about the sixth house. I can see where people could say, oh, yeah, this shows that he definitely, because Venus, Uranus is weird relationships too, and Leo represents children. But it also could speak to the whole concept that he had no childhood. He really was like, I am Peter Pan. He did the fake voice with the Aries South Node Lilith. And the Pisces moon, I think, explains that too. But there was something about Mike where he was very vague and secretive and private, because people said his real speaking voice was definitely much deeper compared to what he, showed in public. But then this Venus, Uranus in the sixth house in Leo, you could look at it like weird, bizarre, sudden relationships, the sudden marriage to Lisa Marie, right? And you see that it's Venus conjunct Uranus, and it happened at 35 years old, which was Aquarius, right? Connected to Uranus in the 12th house of bed pleasures. So one thing I do like about the Venus Leo, Mike definitely represented that with the money, the jewelry, the shopping, like the dancing, all the creativity. Like he was just ahead of his time, a beast. Now, we're going to get into some more dark stuff, because first let's look at the part of fortune in Virgo in the seventh house. Spiritual, financial blessings around the age of 30. You could struggle at a young age with being precise and detailed and, analytical, logical, critical. And I think that's where Joe Jackson was beating Mike's butt. Get these dance moves down. You got to be perfect. You got to be the best. And then that's what he became, okay? And had so many spiritual and financial blessings in his life, even though he had such a tragic life too. I mean, let's be real. Mike's life was always in the public eye, but it was also kind of sad. Because in some ways, he never really got to, think about it, he never got to live out this Uranus freedom, because he was always working. But he did have random, weird, bizarre health issues, right? The skin, the burn, the falls, all that stuff, okay? Now, the Sun, Pluto here in Virgo, well, the Pluto-Virgo generation brought in, civil rights, women's rights, protesting Vietnam, acupuncture, vegetarianism, veganism, rights for humanity, RFK, JFK, MLK, Malcolm X, all this stuff, right? So Pluto-Virgo generation is really underrated. It's one of the most powerful generations, a lot of Gen X, right? But what you'll find, though, their need for the soul psyche to heal through the pain, trauma, and crises is through their health. And Mike had so many health issues, right? Virgo represents the wheat and the medicine. So Mike's health issues, ironically, he took too much medicine to deal with instead of being more natural, okay? But the Pluto conjunct the Sun. We can talk about this for probably 2 hours, but I'm just going to say this speaks to the abuse from the father. The Sun is your vitality, creativity, imagination, right? Your personality, your self-expression, your light, your purpose, right? The Jyotish, right? But it's your identity, but it's also your father, the ego. Mike was very humble, a very feminine energy, and it's at 6 degrees, very feminine energy, the Sun. But that Pluto really speaks to the control, the power under dynamic of the father over him. And this is in the house of career and relationships. And he probably saw his father flexing his power over the mother and the whole family. He's got the Juno there. So, in a way, he could have married a Virgo woman. Debbie was a Sagittarius, and Lisa Marie is on that cusp, but she's like maybe 1 degree, I think 1 degree Pisces, February 19th. Okay. So which makes sense with the Pisces moon, right? They became family when he married her. But, this also speaks to his magnetic power, not just the abuse and the control from his father and manipulation, but when you have Pluto conjunct your sun or moon, there is a power source that is so bigger than life, right? And yeah, Mike probably had his own astrologer. Mike probably knew about the occult. Mike was probably into numerology and tarot and things like that. That would indicate that. Plus his North Node in 8th house, we'll get to that, and the Jupiter there. But having the Pluto in the 7th house with the sun, this is the indicator for extreme fame and the part of fortune. So Michael had more fame than maybe anybody ever in history, right? That we're aware of in modern civilization, right? So that's what this shows here, the part of fortune. And it was almost like kind of sad, but it's deep when you think about it. He was almost Juno Virgo. He was almost married to himself. Mike was very isolated and alone. He was a loner in a lot of ways, So that Peter Pan thing and the eternal child, I think a lot of that comes from the mental and physical abuse and emotional abuse from the father, but also just the whole Jehovah's Witness. And then I think I don't know if he ever officially became a Muslim later on, but he had the FOI around him a lot and then didn't keep them around, which may have protected him from the whole Conrad and other people after him and him being killed. But hey, that's neither here nor there. But I will say this, this is definitely showing his business acumen and him owning part of Sony and having the publishing for himself and the Beatles. Mike was a business savant. Pluto, 7th house with the sun. Now, the sun doesn't like being in the 7th house, right? It's associated with Libra, and it's at sunset. Right? So it kind of, and it's below the ascendant, so it makes you more introverted. Mike was definitely more of an introvert, even though he was this bigger than life dynamic performer. But, also, I think you could look at the Mercury, Venus, Uranus. Mike was dedicated to a life of service. And I think Mike probably had, secretly, he had a sweet tooth. That Venus in the 6th house, you could have a sweet tooth like crazy. And he was kind of married or dedicated to making money. Mike was the perfectionist, critical, detailed. He would, when he did Billie Jean, Mike would, as the floor was lighting up, Mike's foot would hit precisely the floor. So it looked like when he would tap on it, it would light up. Like Mike was in sync with the shot that the cinematographer and director wanted for his videos, It's really astonishing and amazing. I mean, I don't even know what to say. When you look at this Libra 8th house, though, and you've got the North Node, 23 degrees, man, I wish I could break it down for you and read it for you, but it literally describes Michael Jackson. There's a great website that breaks down from this shaman and astrologer, every North Node and the degree, and a little poetic write-up. And the one for, maybe I'll actually put it in the video when I post it up so you guys can read it. It describes Michael Jackson to the T. It will probably blow you away. It's really deep. So I'll have to put that in the description for you to read because it's fascinating. But, my mom had this Libra North Node in the 8th house too. So Mike found peace and harmony and pleasure kind of like in dealing with intimacy and privacy. The Jupiter in 8th house, this can speak to him, maybe getting involved. Obviously he made a ton of money from other people, and this is dealing with debt, taxes, inheritance, IRS, maybe not being able to leave the right inheritance that he wanted maybe for his family or kids. But Jupiter in Libra can speak to great levels of fame in terms of his philosophy was to make deals, to be charming, to be relatable, to have relationships with people, powerful people. The eighth house is about power, but it's also psychology. You know, it's sudden events, you know, death and rebirth, emergencies, secret societies, you know. Having the North Node there, Mike probably gained a lot of knowledge about money, biology, finance. That's why the Jupiter Libra, Mike was such a savvy business person. That's how he wound up owning half of Sony, you know. And you know, this is kind of deep. The Libra North Node, Mike had to learn, and he was, I think, in a lot of ways, he was becoming more peaceful and balanced. Right? He was assertive early on to spark that career, to lead the Jackson 5, to do all the great things he did. But then he was just like, hey, this is it. I'm going to do one last show, one last tour at 50 and blow the world, you know, 50, 51, blow the world off its socks, you know? And that's kind of deep when you think about that. But, you know, he wasn't able to bring that to fruition. Okay. Now, you know, when you're getting to Scorpio, ninth house, and Neptune, this really speaks to a changing of his spirituality over time, his beliefs and philosophies. I think if Mike lived a couple more years, he would have wrote a book about the industry, about his life that could have been, I mean, you know, you think about the album he had, was a double album, maybe History. It was amazing. But I think that he would have done or written something, because the ninth house is publishing. And then also the second marriage, right? The first marriage was Lisa Marie. The second one was Debbie. You know, I think the seventh house opposing that moon in Pisces, and she was a Pisces, speaks to that first marriage. But it was like not going to last long and not that real in a sense. And then neither was this one. You know what I mean? But I think it was more a spiritual friendship because of the Neptune and the association to Pisces. But Mike was a very spiritual person. His beliefs and philosophies were healing people through his music. Heal the world, make it a better place, right? Man in the Mirror. I mean, and Man in the Mirror also, you guys, think about this. Man in the Mirror really speaks to Sun-Pluto conjunction and Venus-Uranus. Because it was like a double entendre. Mike was speaking about himself in the mirror because I don't think he liked what he saw. And I think some of it was from hating his father so much. He didn't want to look like a Jackson anymore. It was almost like he was trying to look like Elizabeth Taylor mixed with Diana Ross, two of his biggest friends, right? So that's the Venus-Uranus in Leo, right? That change. He almost kind of looked like a cat. And then the Virgo Pluto, you know, man in the mirror, looking at yourself, and the transformation, transmutation, right? I mean, he literally mutated himself in such a way that, I mean, you know, he was a handsome, you know, chocolate brother, and he just like destroyed it. Now, yes, he did have the vitiligo, but he took it to a whole nother level. And they say that in his body, he had so many scars and makeup and discoloring when he, you know, an autopsy and all that stuff when he died. It's just tragic and sad. I was very upset when he died. I remember it to this day. But this Neptune in Scorpio is a very healing generation, very spiritual. And I think this, because this is foreign lands, 50 miles or further away, it's also your father's teachings. And there was a lot of deception from the father. This shows the power, control, manipulation, and deception, fog, not seeing things clearly, illusion, delusion, the magic spells that his father put over him, right? But I think Mike tried to turn it to a positive because he was very healing in foreign lands. People would literally, you see the video, they would cry just seeing Michael, like bawling, tears, Michael, screaming for him. So remember I told you, you know, in Annual Perfection, this was Off the Wall, and then the Pisces first house was Thriller. But, you know, also what is fascinating is, what was the last album? Not This Is It, the last recorded one. It might have been Dangerous. I think he was 45 or 43, somewhere in there. So, 48, 47, 46, 45. Yeah, I think it was 45 years old. So that goes back to, the, oh no, 45, 44. It was 43. Dangerous was the eighth house. Yeah. The Dangerous album, Annual Perfection, was the eighth house at 43. So that's kind of wild, right? With the Jupiter, Libra, and North Node in the eighth house. But people could associate the eighth house with mystery and secrets and danger and stuff like that. One thing I would say about Michael and Prince, they both had so many big hits, but they also had some songs that were like almost throwaway songs that were not so good. I think Prince had more of those than Michael, but Prince has a bigger catalog, did more albums than Michael. But this really speaks to the father, the 10th house, right? And having Saturn there, his father was the authority. His father restricted him and also restricted his beliefs and his, the religion, the Jehovah's Witness. Now, I'm not criticizing or knocking anybody that's Jehovah's Witness, but I think from Mike, there was a deception from it with the Scorpio Neptune because of the fact that the father wasn't living up to it. He was cheating on the mother. He was fine with the older brothers having sex when they were on tour. But at the same time, he was controlling Michael, right? You see the conjunction, both at 19. There was a deep control over Mike and his career and his, limiting, right? What does Saturn do? It actually to respond to your abilities, which he did, which helped him with Off the Wall. But there's also that, boundaries, control, fear, anxiety, limitations, delays. In some ways, he delayed Michael leaving the Jacksons. And then Mike created and found that freedom, that liberation, which started, I think, once he went to New York to do the play, which was, oddly enough, like I showed you earlier, right? The Uranus, that's actually kind of deep. Think about that. It was the Uranus 6th house, the freedom and liberation, going to do the play. Then he did the film. So 75, 77. And then another 2 years later, boom, Off the Wall, which was, if you're old school and you like R&B just as much as you like the pop, Off the Wall is a classic. And it was so tight. And you felt the freedom. The shackles of the Saturn were released, and the freedom, the beliefs, the philosophies, the optimistic, futuristic nature. It was amazing. And this speaks to his career. Sagittarius, midheaven. Mike went all over the world. All over the world. But, when you have Saturn in a fire sign, that can speak to the physical pain and arthritis. Especially Saturn in Aries, but even Saturn in Sag. Mike had a lot of pain throughout his body and definitely in the hips and thighs from all the dancing. That's Sagittarius, hips and thighs, Saturn. You see that? Okay. So when we get here to the 11th house, groups, organizations, the internet, astrology, aliens, stepchildren, older siblings, right? I think in some ways he had more of a business relationship with his older siblings, with Jermaine and Rebe, Jackie, Tito, right? Not sure if LaToya was a year or so younger. She might have been a little bit younger, but the three brothers and a sister were older. But Capricorn here, and this is also your hopes, dreams, and wishes. So Mike achieved them all. You know what I mean? Like the Capricorn, like Mike built his own city, his own world, Neverland. Like Mike, achieved the Capricorn, the GOAT, the status, the success, the money. And it also led to his downfall as a human being, though. It's very sad. And then when you get to this 12th house, Aquarius, still you look at the chart ruler of Saturn. So this speaks to him, even with his career success, there was a lot of isolation. He felt isolated, even from his father, his family, and even in his own weird, bizarre 6th house, Neverland. Mike felt isolated and alone. And I know the Chiron Venus, I think the wounds were to him, not him putting wounds on young boys. Nothing was ever, really ever proven. But I'll let you guys decide. But I honestly think that if you know the upbringing of the dad and the power and the abuse put upon him, along with the Jehovah's Witness, his cultural background, all his siblings, that Venus conjunct Uranus, and then the opposition to Chiron, honestly, it speaks more to the whole I am Peter Pan, being abused as a child, not seeing himself as handsome, not liking his brown skin, having the vitiligo, but then changing himself, like dysmorphia, whatever, I don't know what you call it, but it's very unfortunate. And I think, his Mars is not opposing his Neptune, by any degree, but, and then even the fixed star algo, people coming for his head very aggressively. That shows that there in his local community, in LA and Hollywood, attacking, hurting his physical body, which is what happened. But, yeah, Michael Joseph Jackson, one of the greatest of all time. And I don't know. I say he was innocent. I think the chart can, you can interpret it how you want. In terms of just pure astrology, I think you have to be intuitive about it. And I think you have to also understand the culture, the 60s and 70s and 80s. Also how he was raised, his close relationship with the mother on the ascendant. Michael was about 5'9", very skinny and slender, had a lot of physical issues, and eating issues. Oh, also that series, right? That series in Virgo, which I think was, pretty interesting in the 7th house, speaks to the eating disorder. It's a lot. You could see that he went through a lot in life, and I think he felt the need that he had to be perfect. Mike was hard to work with or work for, people said. He was a pleasure, but he was just, the time and hours he put in. Even for that Scream video with him and Janet, but he wanted to connect with Janet, and they both were helping each other out, after the first accusations of sexual abuse against children, and then I think it was before her incident with Justin Timberlake. They both were like, yo, F the media, F this and that, because, it wasn't Janet's fault. Timberlake, should have spoke out, and she shouldn't have been banned from the Grammys or anything. The whole thing was silliness, but that was racism and sexism for Janet. Also Pallas Athena, this can show issues with the dad and how you would resolve or solve problems. And for Mike, it was from the heart, but I think for him, a lot of it was just suddenly leaving the family and the Jacksons. I don't know if you guys remember the Victory Tour. He didn't want to be a part of that. I think, what was that, 84? And he didn't want to be associated with the family anymore, so much more because of his father than anybody else. So Mike decided to go out on his own and work on his own. And that's why this house was lit up in 75 when he did The Wiz on Broadway. Okay. So, yeah, this is Michael Joseph Jackson. I'm Eric Taylor, fellow Virgo. I feel like I did it justice, and, just really looking at, what the truth is, and I think, this was a great life, a famous life that just, if you understand astrology, there's a lot with the North Node in the 8th house, and just the Pluto conjunct the Sun in the 7th house that speaks to money and fame. And the Jupiter brings the fortune and fame in the house of money, power, control, and other people's money. Okay. And so Mike had that like buckets loads, right? That's really deep. Again, I'm going to put this North Node in the description, and I hope you guys enjoyed this astrological natal birth chart reading for Mr. Michael Jackson, the king of pop, my Virgo brother, RIP. And yeah, he died before his 51st birthday. So that's that Mars and Taurus annual perfection year. It's wild. But, Mike had his influence is still here with us today and what he did. And I think a lot of that is the full moon energy and the sun conjunct Pluto. He lived a very powerful, influential life. And the Neptune Scorpio 9th house, along with the Saturn and Sagittarius 10th house, speaks to, he touched people in foreign lands. He really did. I would say Mike was loved in other countries more than he was in his own country. In his own country, he was laughed at and ridiculed and in terrible ways by the media especially. And we know that the media is the media. Not always truthful and not always correct. And Michael Jackson did what he did, and we thank you, brother. Eric Taylor, tailored to your astrology, with Michael Jackson's natal birth chart reading. God bless. And God bless the Jacksons and the entire family and his 3 children. I wish them nothing but the best. Your father was a legend and the king of pop. Peace.
The moon is connected to my emotion. The moon is connected to